started off like most people with the recorder.
Yes.
And that's how most people learn, and that's how I learnt to read music. And when I was in primary school, you know. So there you go. So the recorder, the fingerings of the recorder are basically, and they're based on a very primitive instrument. It's one of the earliest, these kind of flutes with a whistle attached that makes the sound, and with the holes that play the different notes. Yes. That works sequentially. So you 7 fingers, 6 fingers, 5 fingers, 4 fingers. You go up. So that configuration is the basis for every woodwind instrument, really. So there's that, and
well, the way you're describing it, I can see the connection to very primitive instruments that have probably been around for tens of thousands of years.
Of course, yes. They have. It would have been one of the first instruments. Someone would have got a bamboo, a piece of bamboo, and discovered they could blow across the top of it and get a sound, and then some would have discovered if they put holes in it that what it does is lengthen or shorten the instrument. When you have all your fingers down, it means it's you're playing the full length of the instrument, so the note is longer, and so the longer the note, the deeper it is, and as you take your fingers off, the notes are coming out of the holes sequentially as you go up. So the note, the length of the air, is getting shorter and shorter. So
well, when you think about it, there are a number of traditional instruments in which they have several shorter and shorter pipes, and they blow across the tops of the pipes.
That's right. Yes. And
this is sort of, well, it's hard to describe it as high tech, but it's basically a high tech version of that far simpler way of making sounds. Yes.
I mean, and the most obvious one is something like the trombone, where you've got the slide and you pull, so you, or the slide on a guitar. On the guitar, as you go up the neck, you're making the string shorter and shorter. Yeah.
Well, I see you've got a wooden instrument here that looks quite fascinating.
Well, this is a modern imitation of a very old antique instrument, which was the basis of the clarinet, and and the clarinet is the basis of the saxophone. But I'll get to that.
So, what sort of period in history are we talking about?
Well, probably not long after that people were playing this, they somewhere along the line they discovered that if they put a reed, and here on the saxophone, here I've got an example. It's a piece of cane that you attach to a mouthpiece, and when you blow the air between the tip of the mouthpiece and the piece of cane, the cane vibrates.
Yes.
And makes the sound, as in. So, and so this is. I haven't actually got a read on this, but the same applies with this. It's the reason I brought this was to show that it really is a clarinet, but it doesn't have any of the mechanism to make it easier. Yes. So as you can see, it is pretty much the same as the recorder.
Yes. Yeah.
And the same thing applies as you go up as you take your fingers off, going sequentially up the thing, you get from a lower to a higher note.
This bowl is very interesting, isn't it? Because presumably that's to amplify the sound.
Yes.
And yet it's a very simple thing. The gourds grow on vines all over the place.
Yes.
You can see where people sort of have things around them that are easy to find, and they've obviously just wanted to play and see what happens.
Yes. that's so here is a modern clarinet, and as you can see, it's got all this metal mechanism on it. But basically, it's the same thing. If you take you can see the holes are going up here, and the mechanism is just to make it easier and more accurate, and to get more notes. So I won't go into the complications of the difference between the chromatic scale and a diatonic scale. That's for another time, probably. But it allows you to play more notes and makes it easier to be more accurate in the notes you do play. But basically, it's the same thing. It's got that's where you put the reed, the same as on that. And it's called a single reed instrument. And the clarinet first came into music, or this type of clarinet, the modern clarinet, first came into music. I'd say it would have been around the 16th century, and the first person to really write substantially for the clarinet, like wrote a concerto and a clarinet quintet and various other pieces, was Mozart.
Oh, really?
Yes. So not long before that, in the time of Bach, what was called a flute. Now you might have seen the modern flute now played like that and transversal, but in the time of Bach, they were recorders, just like this, no different than this. Yes. And so when you hear the music of Bach or other what's called Baroque music from that period, they're recorders, and the clarinet came along sometime between Bach and Mozart, and Mozart was very quick to pick up on it and use it, and it became an essential part of the orchestra ever since. And there's various different clarinets, which we'll get to, but the same with the saxophones. So continue with our short history. Yes. This is a saxophone. Now, I'm mainly famous, well, not famous, infamous for playing the tenor saxophone, but there are varying forms of saxophones, and this is called a soprano saxophone that I've got here today. And the main saxophones are the soprano, and then the next one from this is called an alto, and that's got the curved look about it that most people will be more familiar with. Yes. Now there are sopranos that are curved, and they're very small, and most sopranos are pretty much they're based on the clarinet, and a man called Adolf Sax in around 1860, I think it was, or
so it actually comes from someone's name. The name of Sax.
Adolf Sax, a German. He was trying to simplify the clarinet, and I won't go. It's to do with what's called the Harmonic Series, which is a natural series of notes that exist in nature. Yes. Which were first really written about and examined scientifically by Pythagoras, the Greek all-round philosopher. And but I won't go into that here. But he was trying to create using now the clarinet, as you know, is parallel. It's not see, the saxophone is conical, means that it goes from narrow, and as it goes down the instrument, it gets wider.
Okay, so this flares only at the bell end, whereas the whole thing flares.
Yes, the whole thing is flaring, whereas the clarinet is the same width all the way down. Yes. So it means that it uses different harmonics of the harmonic series. Yes. And what it enables you to do on the saxophone is there's different registers, and they are different based on different harmonics. Yes. So when you say different register, you're really talking about the whole set of notes builds off another. So with the clarinet, it's the different registers have different fingerings, whereas with the saxophone, what he was trying to attain was that when you went up to the next register, it was the same fingerings as the register below. So it was going up what's called an octave. So do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Do. So that's an octave. It's called an octave. So you've gone up to the next note, C to C, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C.
Yes.
So, for instance, I'll just give you an example. So that's D in the bottom register, and so I've gone into the second register there, and that's what he was trying to attain, and he realised by using metal and a conical. I mean, I'm not sure scientifically how he came about it, but that's what he resulted with. So it's a fairly modern instrument, the saxophone. Yeah.
Yes, I hadn't realised it was quite so recent. But then when I think about it, I don't know of great saxophone pieces written by Mozart, for instance.
Well, that's right. Yeah, yes. There's it is used in the orchestra, but not still not used in a huge way. Not like the clarinet, but it has it. I mean, most people would have heard of Ravel's Bolero.
Yes.
That has a substantial clarinet. Saxophone part in it.
Yes.
Alto saxophone
Yes.
part. So the different saxophones, you have just the soprano, the alto, and then the tenor, which is the same pitch as the soprano, but down an octave. So it's a deeper. It's around about the same as a cello. The alto sax is around about the same as, say, a viola, and then you get the baritone sax, and then there's other that are less used these days. You've got bass sax, contrabass sax that goes right down to the deepest instruments, and you have smaller ones that are higher pitched. There's a sopranino which is shorter than this. But probably the soprano, the alto, the tenor, and the baritone are the most commonly used in this day and age. Yeah.
It's interesting thinking about how there's such a variety in them, because most people just think of the large curved thing and don't think beyond that. But obviously you've got a far greater appreciation for the variety that the saxophone produces.
If you look at pictures and old pictures, or even modern, what's called a big band or a swing band, say Glenn Miller, a lot of people would know Glenn Miller. You'll see the sax section is generally made up of a couple of alto saxes, a couple of tenor saxes, and a baritone sax. That is really the standard fare for a big band, and still is. It's the big bands came in to music. Well, they came in the 1920s, but they really hit their stride in the mid-30s. It became what modern rock music, or they became the rock music of the 30s and 40s. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting to me that the saxophone has not had a large role in orchestral music, yet in popular music, of course, it has a huge role.
Yes. Yeah.
It makes me wonder why the difference, because the beauty of the sound in popular music is surely applicable to orchestral music.
Yes, well, one of the things would be in the 20s, and even with myself, a lot of saxophone players start off on the clarinet. At school, my first. I mean, they're a cheaper instrument for starters, but in the 1920s, it was some black American music, which was called jazz, which came out of the deep south of America, and after the First World War, moved up to the northern urban areas like Chicago and New York, and most of the saxophone players started as clarinet players, and then one of the things about the saxophone that gave it more benefit 20s dance music and that, and the bands that developed at that time, was it was louder than a violin. I mean, the violin would really struggle to be heard in against the drums, you know, the drum kit and trumpets and trombones and in an orchestra. That's why you have so many violins in a section. And
just to give the volume.
Yes, yes. And if someone's a soloist, they stand well out the front, or in modern times they have a microphone.
Yes.
But, the great the first great saxophone players were mainly black musicians, but the white musicians were very quick to catch on to it in the 1920s, and most of the popular music of the 20s and 30s was dominated by the sax section, and then there'd be maybe 2 or 3 trombones and 2 or 3 trumpets, and then the rhythm section. So
when you think about it, it's not actually all that long after the instrument was invented.
No, it's not. It's not. It's I think that what happened is that after the First World War, there were a lot of instruments around from military bands in the South,
yes.
and they were cheap to buy, and they were picked up by pretty poverty-stricken black musicians, and that in places like New Orleans and Memphis and the southern states. New Orleans is the one that's generally mentioned, but it is a bit of a myth. It was widespread that music came from rural music and travelled to the small towns in the south, and then there were black marching bands that used to hire themselves out for funerals and for Mardi Gras and carnivals and festivals and things, and the saxophone became found to be very useful in those bands because it had a volume that could match the trumpets and trombones and that, yeah.